In the gentle, shimmering lands of Ethel, where twilight reigned eternal, and the air hummed with forgotten melodies, lived a young soul named Elara. Her home was a hollowed-out star-petal tree, its bark a soft pearlescent silver, its leaves a perpetual cascade of pale gold and amethyst. The star-petal tree stood on a knoll overlooking the Whisperwind River, a ribbon of liquid moonlight that flowed with a murmur like a lullaby, carrying tiny glowing river sprites on its currents. Elara was not like the other children of Ethel, who spent their days chasing lumina moths through fields of gossamer grass, or learning the ancient songs of the cloud whales. While she loved those things too, Elara possessed a unique sight, a sensitivity to the very fabric of the world around her. She could see the threads of starlight that wove through everything, the shimmer in a dewdrop, the faint pulse in a blooming dream lily, the almost invisible trails left by a leaping moon deer. To Elara, the world wasn't just beautiful. It was a vast, intricate tapestry, alive with a quiet, ceaseless magic. Every evening, as the twin moons of Ethel, Lumina, and Solara began their slow dance across the sky, one casting a gentle silver glow, the other a warm, honeyed light, Elara would climb to the highest branch of her star-petal tree. There, nestled amongst the soft, glowing leaves, she would observe the sky. Not just the moons, but the countless, shimmering motes that drifted like dust across the heavens, each one a tiny star, born from the heart of the cosmos, and carried on the gentle currents of the Athelian winds. These were the starlight seeds, and it was from them that all the light in Ethel ultimately sprang. The starlight seeds were gathered by the Ancient Ones, the revered starlight weavers, who, according to legend, resided in the highest, most secluded peaks of the crystal spires. They spun these seeds into threads, not of cotton or silk, but of pure, ethereal light, and wove them into the very essence of Ethel. It was their work that made the river glow, the flowers bloom with inner luminescence, and the air shimmer with perpetual magic. The weavers were rarely seen, their existence more a comforting myth than a tangible presence, yet their influence was felt in every corner of the land. Lately, though, something had begun to change. Elara, with her unusual sight, was the first to notice. The starlight seeds seemed a little less numerous, their glow a fraction dimmer. The silver glow of Lumina, the moon, felt a touch cooler, and the golden warmth of Solara a whisper fainter. The river sprites, usually so boisterous, seemed to drift with a little less sparkle, their tiny forms less defiant against the water. The dream lilies in the valley, which once opened at twilight with a silent burst of inner light, now unfurled with a hesitant, subdued glow. At first, Elara thought it might be her imagination, a trick of the deepening twilight. But as days turned into weeks, the subtle shifts became undeniable. The leaves of her own star-petal tree, usually a vibrant blend of gold and amethyst, now held a faint, almost imperceptible pallor. The air, which once thrummed with a vibrant, almost audible magic, now felt quieter, like a song played on an instrument with a single string missing. She tried to speak of it to her grandmother, Lyra, whose skin was like ancient parchment, and whose eyes held the wisdom of 1,000 sunsets. Lyra was a gentle soul, a teller of stories and a keeper of old lore, but her sight, though keen for her years, did not possess Elara's unique sensitivity. "The light is fading, Nana," Elara would say, tracing patterns in the dust motes dancing in a stray sunbeam that found its way into their cozy tree home. "The starlight threads feel thinner, weaker." Lyra would smile, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "The world breathes, little one. Sometimes it breathes deeply, sometimes softly. All things ebb and flow. Perhaps the starlight weavers are simply resting, or weaving a particularly intricate dream for us." Elara would nod, trying to believe, but the unease persisted. She knew the difference between a natural ebb and a true decline. This felt like the latter. It was as if the very heart of Ethel, which beat with the rhythm of woven starlight, was faltering. One evening, as Lumina cast her pale light across the land, Elara climbed her tree as usual. But tonight, instead of the comforting dance of starlight seeds, she saw something else. A faint, almost invisible tear in the fabric of the sky itself, a tiny rip where the starlight threads seemed to fray and vanish, rather than drift gently. It was high above, near the highest peak of the crystal spires, where the starlight weavers were said to dwell. Her breath caught in her throat. This was more than an ebb. This was a wound. The next morning, Elara rose with a quiet determination. She packed a small satchel with a handful of sunberries, a flask of dew water, and her grandmother's old smooth riverstone, which was said to bring good fortune. She left a note for Lyra, carefully penned on a starpetal leaf with berry juice. Going to seek the source of the quiet. Be back soon. Love, Elara. She knew, deep in her heart, that she had to investigate. The faint tear in the sky, the diminishing starlight, these were not things to be ignored. If the starlight weavers were truly resting, or if something had happened to them, then the light of Ethel, and perhaps Athelia itself, was in danger. Her journey began with the familiar path along the Whisperwind River. The air was cool and crisp, but the usual sparkling mist that rose from the river was thinner, almost translucent. The river sprites, usually darting and playing, seemed to be huddling together, their lights barely a flicker. "Good morning, river sprites," Elara whispered, dipping her fingers into the cool water. "Have you seen anything unusual near the crystal spires?" The sprites, usually eager to share gossip in their tinkling, bell-like language, merely shivered, their tiny lights dimming further. One, braver than the others, brushed against her finger, and then pointed a tiny, glowing arm towards the north, towards the distant, glittering peaks of the spires. Its light pulsed rapidly, a silent signal of distress. Elara thanked the sprite and continued on, her heart growing heavier with each step. Well, the path soon led her away from the river and into the Whispering Woods, a forest renowned for its ancient trees, whose branches intertwined so thickly that they formed a perpetual canopy, allowing only dappled sunlight to filter through in shimmering pools. Today, those pools of light seemed fewer and far between, and the shadows felt deeper, longer. The Whispering Woods were usually a symphony of rustles and hums, of unseen creatures moving beneath a carpet of glowing moss. Today, the symphony was muted. The glow moss on the forest floor, which usually radiated a soft emerald light, now merely pulsed with a faint greenish hue. The ancient trees, their bark, etched with centuries of silent stories, seemed to droop, their leaves a little less vibrant. Elara walked carefully, her bare feet silent on the springy moss. She kept her eyes peeled, not just for the path, but for any signs of magic, any stray starlight threads she could follow. She knew that the true path to the crystal spires was not a simple road, but a winding journey guided by the land's own magic. Deep within the woods, she came across a grove of sun-kissed willows. These majestic trees were known for their long, shimmering branches that wept tears of pure, liquid light, which collected in crystalline pools at their bases. These pools were traditionally used by the people of Ethel to recharge their spirit lamps and to gather light for special ceremonies. But today, the sun-kissed willows were not weeping light. Their branches hung heavy and still, their leaves a dull silvery gray. The crystalline pools beneath them were almost dry, holding only a few sluggish drops of a pale, milky liquid that barely glowed. Elara knelt beside one of the pools, her fingers tracing the rough, dry crystals. She remembered coming here with Lyra as a younger child, marveling at the constant, gentle rain of light, feeling the warmth radiating from the pools. Now, there was only a chilling coolness. "What has happened to you, old friends?" she whispered, her voice soft in the still grove. A faint rustle came from the highest branches of one of the willows. A small creature, no bigger than her thumb, cautiously descended. It was a flicker sprite, a tiny being made entirely of concentrated starlight, usually zipping and darting with effervescent energy. This one, however, moved slowly, its light flickering weakly, as if struggling to stay alight. The threads," the flicker sprite whispered, its voice a series of faint crackling pops. "They are breaking from above." It pointed a tiny translucent arm upwards, towards the canopy of the woods, and beyond, towards the invisible peaks of the crystal spires. "The starlight weavers?" Elara asked, her heart sinking. The flicker sprite trembled, its light dimming further. Then it solidified into a tiny, unmoving crystal, its life force extinguished. Elara gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. She had never seen a flicker sprite die before. They were beings of pure light, meant to live as long as the starlight itself. This was serious. More serious than she had imagined. The light wasn't just fading, it was failing. And creatures of light were perishing. A wave of urgency washed over her, replacing her earlier gentle curiosity with a firmer resolve. She had to reach the crystal spires. She had to find the starlight weavers. Elara rose, her gaze fixed on the direction the flicker sprite had pointed. She knew the whispering woods were vast, and beyond them lay the treacherous, shimmering landscape of the Shard Plains, a maze of towering crystal formations that reflected light in dizzying, disorienting ways. But she also knew that within the Shard Plains lay the path to the spires themselves. She pressed on, pushing deeper into the woods, her senses heightened. The silence grew. Even the usual soft breeze that rustled the leaves seemed to hold its breath. She passed trees whose usually vibrant sap now merely oozed a dull, sticky substance. She saw patches of dream lilies that hadn't opened at all, their petals tightly furled, like tiny fists clenching against an unseen pain. After what felt like hours, the trees began to thin, and the ground underfoot changed from soft moss to rough, crystalline gravel. She had reached the edge of the whispering woods. Before her lay the Shard Plains. The sight was breathtaking, even in its current diminished state. Thousands of crystal spires, ranging from the size of her finger to towering peaks that scraped the undersides of the twin moons, rose from the ground in a chaotic, glittering expanse. They were usually ablaze with reflected starlight, a blinding spectacle of rainbows and shimmering iridescence. Today, however, while still beautiful, they were subdued. Their reflections were muted, their colors less vibrant, as if a thin veil had been drawn over their surfaces. Navigating the Shard Plains was known to be perilous. The crystals had a peculiar property. They could absorb and redirect ambient starlight, creating illusions, echoing sounds, and even altering perception of time. Without the full, robust presence of starlight, Elara worried what new dangers or disorientations might arise. She took a deep breath, clutching Lyra's smooth riverstone in her hand. It felt warm, a small comfort against the chilling truth of the fading light. She stepped onto the crystalline ground, her bare feet crunching softly on the tiny shards. As she entered the maze, the crystals began to hum, a low, resonant thrum that vibrated through her bones. The sound was usually a joyful chorus of light, but now it felt like a mournful dirge. The air grew colder, and a strange shimmering mist began to rise from the ground, swirling around the bases of the spires. This was the shard mist, a phenomenon caused by the interaction of starlight with the unique crystal formations, usually a harmless, beautiful sight. But today, it seemed thicker, less ethereal, almost tangible. Elara remembered Lyra's stories about the Shard Plains. "Follow the song of the crystal heart, little one," Lyra would say. "It guides those with pure intent. Its melody is the truest light." "The crystal heart was a legendary immense crystal at the very center of the plains," said to pulse with the purest starlight. Elara closed her eyes, trying to feel for that song, for the rhythm of the crystal heart. She strained her unique senses, trying to perceive the starlight threads. She found them, but they were tangled, frayed, and barely glowing, like ancient cobwebs coated in dust. The song of the crystal heart was almost inaudible, a faint whisper against the mournful hum of the other crystals. She chose a path between two towering, jagged spires, their surfaces reflecting her image distortedly, like a ripple in water. As she ventured deeper, the mist thickened, obscuring her vision. The spires around her seemed to shift and dance, creating phantom pathways and illusory walls. She knew this was the disorienting effect of the Shard Plains, amplified by the weakened starlight. "Stay true, Elara," she whispered to herself, recalling Lyra's words. "Follow the truest light." But where was the truest light when all light was fading? She pressed her hand against a cold, smooth crystal face, trying to ground herself. As she did, she felt a faint vibration, a tiny pulse of starlight, almost imperceptible. It was coming from within the crystal. Not a reflection, but an internal glow. Elara concentrated, extending her unique sight. She saw a single thin thread of starlight, almost invisible, running through the crystal, not just reflecting off its surface. It was faint, but it was there, pointing in a specific direction. It was like a hidden current in the vast, still ocean. This must be it, she realized. Not the direct path, but the thread of true starlight that could lead her through the illusion. It was a test, a challenge for one who could truly see the starlight. With renewed purpose, Elara began to follow the faint internal threads. She moved slowly, carefully, sometimes pressing her hand against a spire to feel for the vibration, sometimes closing her eyes to better perceive the thread's direction. The shard mist tried to trick her, shaping itself into familiar figures, whispering her name in the voices of loved ones, but she held firm, her gaze fixed on the almost invisible path of light. She passed illusions of grand banquet halls, of fields of blooming dream lilies, of her own starpetal tree, all flickering and dissolving as she approached. She ignored them, her focus unwavering. This was not a journey for sight, but for insight. After what felt like an age, the mist began to thin. The low hum of the crystal softened, and the light, though still subdued, seemed to grow steadier. The illusionary forms vanished, and the spires around her settled into their true, magnificent shapes. And then she saw it. In the very center of the shard plains, rising higher than all the surrounding spires, stood a single colossal crystal, its surface smooth and flawless. It pulsed with a faint, steady light, a deep, resonant hum emanating from its core. This was the crystal heart, the true beacon of the plains. But even the crystal heart seemed diminished. Its usual brilliant glow was a mere shimmer, its powerful hum, a gentle thrum. And on its surface, Elara could clearly see faint, spiderweb cracks, like tiny fractures marring a precious jewel. Her heart ached at the sight. If even the crystal heart, the very embodiment of starlight in the plains, was damaged, then the situation was far more dire than she had imagined. At the base of the crystal heart, nestled in a small alcove, was a figure. It was old, impossibly old, its form almost blended with the crystal itself. Its skin was like polished stone, its hair a cascade of shimmering crystal filaments. Its eyes, deep and ancient, were closed, and its hands, gnarled and powerful, rested on the crystal heart, as if trying to mend its fractures. This was the Stone Speaker, one of the ancient guardians of Athel, a living conduit between the land and the starlight weavers, said to be one of the oldest beings in the realm, a silent witness to countless ages. Elara approached cautiously, her bare feet making no sound on the crystalline ground. She knelt before the Stone Speaker, her gaze respectful, her heart filled with a mixture of awe and trepidation. "Venerable Stone Speaker," Elara whispered, her voice barely audible. "I am Elara, from the starpetal tree on Whisperwind Knoll. I have come because the light is fading. The starlight is breaking. Even the flicker sprites are perishing." The Stone Speaker's ancient eyes slowly, creakily, opened. They were like polished obsidian, reflecting the faint light of the crystal heart. Its gaze was deep, piercing, as if seeing not just Elara, but the very essence of her soul. "The threads grow thin, child," the Stone Speaker rumbled, its voice like stones shifting deep beneath the earth. "The great loom falters. The starlight weavers, they are troubled." Elara's breath hitched. "Troubled? What has happened? Can it be mended?" The Stone Speaker sighed, a sound like wind through mountain passes. "A great shadow has fallen upon the crystal spires where the weavers spin their light, a shadow that consumes light, rather than reflects it. It drains the starlight seeds before they can be woven. It poisons the great loom itself." "A shadow?" Elara asked, a shiver running down her spine. This sounded unlike anything she had ever heard of in Athel. "A shadow born of forgotten fears," the Stone Speaker continued, its gaze distant as if seeing into the past. "It feeds on doubt and despair, on the absence of light, and it grows, drawing strength from the fading starlight." Its ancient hand, gnarled like a root, reached out and gently touched one of the cracks on the crystal heart. "The heart weakens. Soon, its light may be extinguished entirely. What can be done?" Elara asked, her voice trembling. "How can we fight a shadow?" The Stone Speaker turned its obsidian eyes back to Elara, a flicker of something ancient and knowing within them. "The starlight weavers, they have tried, but this shadow, it binds them, twists their own light against them. They are trapped, unable to mend the loom, unable to spin new light. Then I must go to them." Elara declared, her resolve firm. The Stone Speaker regarded her for a long moment, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching its stone lips. "You see the threads, child. You feel the pulse of the light even when it weakens. You are a nascent weaver yourself, perhaps, though you know it not. Elara blinked, surprised. "Me? A weaver?" "The starlight weavers seek not power but connection," the stone speaker explained. "They are the hands that guide the light, but the heart that truly sees it. You possess that heart, but the path to the crystal spires, especially now, is perilous. The shadow will try to turn your own light against you, to feed on your fear." "I am not afraid," Elara said, though a tiny tremor ran through her. She was afraid, but she knew she couldn't let it stop her. The thought of Ethel losing its light, of the river sprites winking out, of her star-petal tree growing dull and lifeless, was far more terrifying than any shadow. The stone speaker slowly rose, its great crystalline form unfolding like an ancient mountain. "Then you must seek the starlit wellspring. It lies beneath the highest peak, cloaked in ancient magic. Only its pure waters can rekindle a fading light, and perhaps break the shadow's hold long enough for the weavers to act. But the way is guarded, not by beasts, but by trials of the heart and spirit." "The starlit wellspring," Elara repeated, committing the name to memory. "How do I find it?" The stone speaker pointed a gnarled finger towards the highest, most distant peak of the crystal spires, which now seemed to shimmer with an ominous dark haze, almost like a bruise on the sky. "Follow the path of the whispering echoes. They are the last remnants of the weavers' songs, trapped within the spires. They will guide you, if you listen with your heart, not just your ears. And beware of the silent bloom. It is the shadow's flower, and its beauty is its deadliest trap." With these words, the stone speaker's eyes closed once more, and it settled back into its ancient slumber, its form once again blending with the crystal heart, leaving Elara alone in the shimmering expanse of the Shard Plains, with a name, a mission, and a new, daunting understanding of the darkness that threatened her world. The path ahead was clear now, even if shrouded in danger. She had to reach the crystal spires, find the starlit wellspring, and help the starlight weavers. The fate of Ethel, and all its gentle magic, now rested on the shoulders of a small girl who could see the threads of light. She took a deep breath, clutching Lyra's riverstone, and set her gaze towards the bruised peak, ready for whatever trials lay ahead. The air grew thin and sharp as Elara began her ascent, the familiar, comforting sense of the valley floor quickly fading, replaced by the crisp, cool breath of the mountains. The path, once a gentle deer trail near her home, grew faint, then vanished entirely, leaving her to pick her way over ancient, moss-covered stones and tangled roots. The forest, which had once cradled her in its green embrace, now felt different. The light filtering through the canopy was dimmer, tinged with a bruised, purplish hue that seemed to absorb rather than reflect the sun. She clutched Lyra's riverstone, its smooth surface a small anchor in the rising tide of her fear. Her enhanced sight, which had once filled her with wonder, now showed her a world in distress. The vibrant, golden threads that usually hummed through the leaves and around the tree trunks were frayed, some snapping like old harp strings, others dulled to a sickly gray. Where they had once woven a tapestry of living light, now there were gaping holes, like moth-eaten fabric. The energy of Ethel was not just fading, it was being actively consumed. A shiver, not entirely from the cold, ran down her spine. She saw a thick, oily darkness coiling around the base of an ancient oak, clinging to the light threads like a hungry leech, slowly drawing their luminescence into itself. The tree, once a bastion of strength, looked tired, its leaves drooping, its bark cracked and weeping a dark sap. "Pow!" Elara hesitated, her small hand reaching out instinctively, as if she could brush the darkness away. But it pulsed, a silent, malevolent beat, and she pulled back, a knot forming in her stomach. This was not just an absence of light, it was an active presence of something cold and consuming. She pressed on, guided less by a visible path and more by the faintest glimmer of unbroken light threads, following their faint luminescence where they managed to pierce the growing gloom. The forest grew quieter, the cheerful chirping of birds replaced by an eerie stillness, broken only by the rustle of unseen creatures and the whisper of the wind through skeletal branches. Each step felt heavy, a small act of defiance against the encroaching silence. Hours bled into one another. Her legs ached and her stomach rumbled, but the urgency of her mission pushed her forward. She found a small sheltered alcove beneath an overhang of rock as dusk began to settle, painting the sky in angry shades of violet and crimson. The darkness, no longer content to merely cling to the forest, seemed to rise from the very ground, thick and suffocating. As she huddled against the cold stone, a flicker of movement caught her eye. It was a tiny light, no bigger than her thumbnail, dancing erratically amongst the gloom. It pulsed, a fragile, almost desperate beacon. Intrigued, and a little wary, Elara watched. The light drifted closer, revealing itself to be a creature unlike anything she had ever seen. It was a moth, but not made of scales and dust. Its wings were intricate, like shards of stained glass, glowing with an internal soft luminescence that shifted through hues of pale blue and silver. Its body was slender, almost ethereal, and its antennae delicate as spun moonlight. It hovered before her, its light dimming and brightening as if breathing. "Hello," Elara whispered, her voice a small wavering sound in the vast silence. The moth's light brightened in response, and a faint musical chime echoed in the air. A sound like tiny wind chimes in a gentle breeze. It circled her head once, then landed gently on her outstretched finger. Its warmth was surprising, a gentle thrum against her skin, and she saw that its light threads, though delicate, were vibrant and unbroken, a miniature sun in the encroaching night. As she gazed at the wondrous creature, she noticed something else. Around the moth, the heavy darkness seemed to recede, if only a fraction. Its light, though small, was a shield. "You're beautiful," Elara murmured, a smile finally touching her lips. "Are you a spirit of the light?" The moth chimed again, a more sustained melody this time, and nudged its head against her finger. Then it floated upwards, hovering directly in front of her face, its luminous wings beating softly. She understood with a sudden clarity that bypassed words that this creature was drawn to her, to the unique strength of the light threads that hummed within her. It was a glimmer ring, a guardian of the fragile magic, and it was seeking solace, and perhaps offering guidance. "You'll come with me?" she asked, a surge of hope blooming in her chest. The glimmerwing, which Elara decided to call Lumen, for it was pure light, circled her once more, then settled on her shoulder, its soft glow a comforting presence against the gathering night. With Lumen's faint, steady light to guide her, and a newfound sense of companionship, Elara finally drifted into a fitful sleep, dreams of tangled threads and shimmering wings filling her mind. The next morning the world felt colder, the air heavier. The bruised peak of the crystal spires was still a distant promise, now partially obscured by a swirling grey mist that seemed to cling to the higher elevations. Lumen, perched on her shoulder, pulsed with a nervous energy, its chimes more frequent and urgent. As they pressed on, the forest floor gave way to a more desolate landscape. The trees thinned, becoming gnarled and twisted, their branches like skeletal fingers reaching into the bleak sky. The ground became boggy in places, treacherous and soft, sucking at her worn boots. This was the Shadowfen, a place whispered about in hushed tones in the valley, a wetland where the sun rarely touched the ground. Here, the darkness was not just a stain, it was an active force. Wisps of shadow writhed in the corners of her vision, sometimes coalescing into indistinct shapes that melted away when she turned to face them. The light threads were almost entirely severed here, leaving vast tracts of the land barren and lifeless. The air hung heavy with a strange metallic scent and a pervasive, chilling silence. Lumen became her most vital guide. Its light, though small, seemed to resonate with the remaining faint pulses of magic, pointing her towards patches of firmer ground, or warning her away from pools of stagnant black water that seemed to swallow all light. Elara found herself relying on her unique sight more than ever, not just to see the threads but to feel them, a deep intuition guiding her steps. She began to notice that the darkness pulsed with a slow, hungry rhythm, and where it was strongest, the very air felt colder, denser. One afternoon, navigating through a particularly dense thicket of thorny, light-starved bushes, Elara stumbled upon a sight that made her heart ache. It was a small grove, almost hidden, where a cluster of moon-petal flowers, usually vibrant with silver-blue luminescence, lay shriveled and gray. Their light threads were not just severed, they were entirely gone as if devoured. As she knelt, a tear tracing a path down her dust-smudged cheek, Lumen flew from her shoulder, circling the dead flowers with frantic chimes. Its light flickered, as if in pain. Then it landed on one of the withered petals, and Ilara watched in amazement as a faint, almost imperceptible silver glow emanated from Lumen, spreading slowly into the flower. For a moment, a single moon petal shimmered, a ghost of its former beauty, before the light faded again. It was a small act, almost insignificant, but it sparked something within Ilara. She thought of Lyra's river stone still warm in her hand. Lyra had told her that the stone held a whisper of the river's song, a fragment of its living light. Could it help? Hesitantly, Ilara placed the smooth gray stone onto the withered moon petal. She closed her eyes, focusing not on what she could see, but on what she could feel. She imagined the strong, resilient flow of the river near her home, the vibrant life it carried, the constant, unbroken current of its light threads. She pictured the warmth of the sun on her skin, the gentle breath of the wind, the comforting presence of her mother and Lyra. She poured all her hope, all her longing for Ethel's restoration, into the stone. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, a faint warmth spread from the stone, not just into the flower, but into her own hand. And then, a tiny, almost imperceptible thread of silver light, thinner than a spider's silk, began to emanate from the stone, reaching out to the moon petal. It was so faint, so fragile, that she wondered if she was imagining it. But Lumen chimed, a soft, encouraging melody, and its own light pulsed with renewed strength. The silver thread connected, not to the dead petal, but to a deeper, almost invisible root of the plant. And then, with an astonishing slowness, a single tiny spark of silver-blue light ignited within the withered moon petal. It was not enough to revive it fully, not even close, but it was a spark. A promise. A thread, reconnected. Ilara gasped, her eyes wide. She had not created light. She had merely helped the severed thread find its way back to a source, channeling the gentle magic of the riverstone. It was like mending a tiny tear in a vast tapestry. The effort left her breathless, a strange tingling sensation in her fingertips, but also a surge of exhilaration. She wasn't just a seer of threads. She could, with help, mend them. With renewed purpose, Ilara and Lumen continued their arduous journey through the Shadowfen. The days blurred into a pattern of careful navigation, quiet determination, and small, incremental acts of mending. Whenever they found a cluster of light-starved plants, or a patch of ground where the threads were completely gone, Ilara would take out Lyra's stone, focus her intent, and try to re-establish a connection. Most times it was only a faint glimmer, a whisper of life, but each time, Lumen would pulse with encouragement, and Ilara felt a little stronger, a little more confident in her burgeoning ability. The Shadowfen eventually began to recede, giving way to a harsher, rockier terrain. The air grew thinner still, carrying the scent of pine and cold stone. The crystal spires, now much closer, loomed on the horizon, magnificent and terrifying. They were not merely mountains. They were colossal formations of shimmering, multifaceted crystal, their peaks piercing the clouds like titanic diamonds. But even they seemed touched by the encroaching darkness. A strange, swirling mist, thick and purplish-gray, clung to their lower slopes, obscuring the path to their base. As they began the final ascent towards the spires, the ground became increasingly treacherous. Jagged rocks jutted out at odd angles, and deep crevices crisscrossed the path. The wind howled through the passes, a mournful cry that seemed to carry the sorrow of the fading world. Lumen, usually so bright, kept its light focused downwards, guiding Ilara's feet, its chimes now a continuous worried hum. She could see it clearly now. The darkness was not just around the spires, it was climbing them. Thick, oily tendrils of shadow snaked up the crystalline faces, dulling their luminescence, extinguishing the very light they were meant to radiate. The threads of light that connected to the spires, once vibrant arteries of magic, were now struggling, flickering in and out of existence. Ilara's heart pounded. This was worse than she had imagined. The darkness was trying to smother the very source of Ethel's light. They reached a narrow, winding pass that led directly towards the base of the tallest spire. The mist here was particularly dense, swirling around them, cold and damp. Ilara could barely see 10 feet in front of her. And still wind, and in one sound. Lumen's glow struggled against it, reduced to a faint halo. Suddenly, a low growl rumbled through the mist, a sound that vibrated through Alara's bones. It was deep, guttural, and filled with a chilling malice. Lumen darted into the air, its chimes frantic, its light flickering wildly. "What is it, Lumen?" Alara whispered, her hand instinctively going to Lyra's stone, her heart hammering against her ribs. The mist swirled and a shape began to coalesce within it. It was massive, hulking, vaguely lupine, but twisted and malformed. Its fur was the color of dried blood, matted and coarse, and its eyes glowed with a malevolent reddish light that seemed to pierce the mist. It was not a creature of Ethel. It was a beast of shadow, a guardian of the encroaching darkness. It let out another growl, a challenge, and took a ponderous step forward. The ground trembled beneath its weight. Alara could see the darkness radiating from it, thick and suffocating, actively devouring the light threads that still struggled to exist in this high pass. This creature was not just corrupted, it was woven from the very essence of the encroaching gloom. Fear, cold and sharp, threatened to paralyze her. She was just a small girl, armed only with a riverstone and an ability to see light. How could she possibly face such a monstrous thing? But then, she looked at Lumen, trembling but still bravely glowing beside her. She thought of Lyra, of her mother, of the gentle, vibrant Ethel she knew, slowly being choked by this darkness. She thought of the moon petal, and the tiny spark of life she had helped rekindle. Taking a deep, shuddering breath, Alara clutched Lyra's stone tightly. She might be small, but she carried a piece of Ethel's living light within her, and she had a purpose. The path to the crystal spires was blocked, but she would not turn back. She would not let this darkness win. She fixed her gaze on the glowing red eyes of the beast, her own eyes, though filled with fear, burning with a new, quiet resolve. She fixed her gaze on the glowing red eyes of the beast, her own eyes, though filled with fear, burning with a new, quiet resolve. The creature before her was vast, a hulking shadow against the dim, starless sky. Its form was indistinct, a shifting mass of darkness, but its eyes pulsed with an angry, sorrowful light, like embers left to smolder in a forgotten hearth. It was not a creature of tooth and claw, Alara realized, but something far older, far more tragic. It was the very embodiment of the past's despair, solidified by the encroaching gloom. The air around it crackled with a cold, heavy silence that swallowed even the whispers of the wind. Alara felt the chill seep into her bones, but her grip on Lyra's smooth stone tightened, a warm counterpoint to the encroaching cold. She remembered the moon petal, how fragile it had been, and how a touch of care, a spark of pure intention, had coaxed it back to life. This beast, too, felt like something that had once been alive, now twisted and bound by the encroaching shadows. It was not an enemy to be fought with force, but a sorrow to be understood. Taking another deep breath, Alara did something unexpected. She closed her eyes, not in surrender, but in focus. She didn't have a spell, or a magical incantation. All she had was the warmth in her heart, the memory of Lyra's gentle smile, and the faint, persistent hum of Ethel's living light that now felt like a part of her own being. She imagined that light, not as a weapon, but as a song. A soft, wordless melody of hope and compassion, reaching out from her very core. When she opened her eyes, the world seemed to have softened. The beast's red gaze was still fixed on her, but something had shifted. She raised her hand, not in defiance but in an offering of peace. Lyra's stone nestled in her palm, radiating a faint, almost imperceptible silver glow. "You are not darkness," Alara whispered, her voice surprisingly steady in the vast silence. "You are hurt." The beast recoiled, a low, guttural sound rumbling deep within its shadowy form. It was a sound of pain, of confusion, not aggression. The red light in its eyes flickered, momentarily dimming, like coals dampened by a sudden rain. It took a hesitant step back and then another, its immense form seeming to ripple and waver at the edges. As Alara continued to hold her hand out, the silver glow from Lyra's stone intensified, not brightly, but with a deep, comforting warmth. It pulsed softly, a heartbeat of light against the oppressive gloom. The air around the beast seemed to shimmer, the cold silence beginning to recede, replaced by a faint, almost forgotten hum, the echo of the natural world trying to reassert itself. The beast let out a long, shuddering sigh that seemed to draw the very sorrow from the air. Its shadowy form began to thin, to unravel at the edges, revealing glimpses of what might have been beneath. Gnarled roots, ancient stones, and perhaps the faint outline of a forgotten path. The red light in its eyes faded, replaced by a softer, melancholic amber, then a deep, mossy green. Slowly, majestically, the great shadow began to fold in on itself, not dissipating entirely, but shrinking, condensing. It flowed down, until it coalesced around a cluster of ancient twisted yew trees that guarded the entrance to the pass. The trees, once dark and forbidding, now seemed to breathe, their leaves shimmering with a dew-kissed green. At their base, where the beast had been most dense, a small, gnarled figure began to emerge, still shadowy, but no longer menacing. It was a guardian, an old spirit of the pass, ensnared and corrupted by the encroaching gloom, now partially freed. The guardian, no taller than Elara herself, but ancient and wise, lifted a hand, its fingers like intertwining branches. A single, shimmering tear, like a drop of liquid starlight, rolled down its bark-like cheek. It pointed a trembling finger towards the path beyond the yew trees, a path that had been utterly swallowed by the beast's presence moments before. "Go, child of light," a voice like rustling leaves whispered, barely audible. "The path is open for a time, but beware. The shadows are deep, the heart of Ethel calls, but the way is winding, and full of forgotten songs." Elara nodded, her own eyes welling up with a silent understanding. She didn't know how she had done it, only that the warmth in her heart, the spark of Ethel's living light, had been enough. She had offered kindness, and the sorrow had receded. With a final grateful glance at the quiet guardian, Elara stepped past the ancient yews. The air on the other side of the pass was different. It was still cool, but carried the scent of damp earth and distant pines, a promise of life. The path ahead was indeed winding, a narrow trail barely visible beneath the tangle of undergrowth, but it was clear. As she walked, the landscape began to change. The craggy, forbidding peaks of the Whispering Pass gave way to a deeper, denser forest. The trees here were unlike any she had seen before, their trunks twisted into fantastical shapes, their leaves glowing with faint, ethereal colors, from soft violet to shimmering gold. This was no ordinary woodland. This was a place steeped in ancient magic, where the veil between worlds felt thin. The silence here was profound, broken only by the soft rustle of her own footsteps on the mossy ground. Elara found herself listening, straining to catch those forgotten songs the guardian had mentioned. She felt a growing sense of wonder, but also a prickle of unease. The darkness that had troubled the Moonpetal Valley and corrupted the past guardian was still out there, lurking, waiting. Suddenly, a faint, high-pitched chime echoed through the trees. It wasn't a sound of warning, but of curiosity, playful and bright. Elara stopped, looking around. From behind a colossal tree with bark like polished obsidian, a tiny creature emerged. It was no bigger than her thumb, with iridescent wings like a dragonfly's, and a body made of pure, sparkling light. Its eyes were two emerald pinpricks, full of mischief and intelligence. It hovered before her, circling her head with a delicate dance, its chime-like song accompanying its movements. "Greetings, little traveler," a voice chimed, like 100 tiny bells. The sound seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, a symphony of tiny voices speaking as one. A spark of the old light indeed, rare to see it burning so brightly in these shadowed days. Elara blinked, surprised. You can speak?" "We speak the language of the forest, the language of light, the language of heart," the tiny creature chimed, settling on her outstretched finger. Its light felt warm, like a tiny sunbeam. "And you, child, have a heart that sings. My name is Lumina, and I am a Glimmerwing. We are the watchers of the weave, the threads of magic that bind this forest." "I am Elara," she replied, marveling at the delicate weight of the Glimmerwing. "I am on my way to the crystal spires, the heart of Ethel." Lumina's wings fluttered rapidly, sending out a shower of golden dust. "Ah, the spires! A long and perilous journey, even for those with wings. The forest you now enter is the Whispering Woods, where paths shift and memories intertwine. The darkness has touched even these ancient boughs, twisting the true ways." "Twisting the ways?" Elara asked, a knot forming in her stomach. "Indeed, what seems a clear path may lead you in circles. What appears as a welcoming glade may be a trap woven of lost dreams. You must listen, child. Listen with more than your ears. Lumina's emerald eyes seemed to sparkle with ancient knowledge. Why? The Whispering Woods holds the echoes of Ethel's beginnings, but also the shadows of its decline. You must find the true song. Elara felt a thrill of both apprehension and excitement. How do I find the true song? Follow the thread of light you carry, Lumina chimed, taking flight again, spiraling upwards. It is not just a light, Elara. It is a beacon, a compass, and perhaps a friend. As Lumina spoke, the Glimmerwing began to fly ahead, a tiny shimmering guide darting between the luminous trees. Elara followed, her steps lighter now with this unexpected companion. The Whispering Woods was a place of breathtaking beauty, but also of subtle deception. Paths would appear and vanish, trees would seem to shift their positions, and the air would occasionally shimmer, revealing fleeting images of ancient forest spirits or long-lost creatures. Lumina, however, seemed to navigate the changing landscape with ease, often pausing to wait for Elara, or to point a tiny, glowing antenna towards a barely perceptible opening in the undergrowth that Elara might have missed. One moment, they were walking through a grove of trees with leaves like spun glass, chiming in the gentle breeze. The next, they stepped into a clearing where the ground was covered in a carpet of luminous fungi, casting a soft, otherworldly glow. Here the air was thick with the scent of damp earth and something sweet, like forgotten honey. As Elara ventured deeper, she began to notice other subtle shifts. The sounds of the forest changed. Sometimes she would hear the faint, melodious laughter of unseen children, or the deep, resonant hum of ancient incantations carried on the wind. These were the forgotten songs Lumina had spoken of, the echoes of Ethel's past, lingering in the fabric of the woods. But with these beautiful echoes came shadows. Occasionally the air would turn cold and heavy, and the luminous leaves would dim. The laughter would turn into a mournful wail, and the ancient hum would become a discordant whisper, speaking of loss and despair. These were the moments when the encroaching darkness made its presence felt, trying to twist the beauty of the woods into something sorrowful. It was during one such moment, as the air grew heavy and the path seemed to dissolve into a thick swirling mist, that Elara felt a deep sense of dread. The luminous fungi on the ground began to flicker and die, and the trees around them seemed to shrink away, their branches becoming skeletal and menacing. "Hold fast, Elara." Lumina's chime was urgent, a tiny spark against the encroaching gloom. The forest tries to lead you astray, to feed on your fear. Focus on the light within. Elara squeezed Lyra's stone, its warmth a comfort. She closed her eyes again, just as she had with the beast. She thought of the moon petal, fragile but persistent. She thought of Lyra, her unwavering belief. She thought of the crystal spires, a beacon of hope. She imagined the living light, not as a gentle hum, but as a strong, unwavering flame within her heart, pushing back against the cold. When she opened her eyes, the mist was still there, thick and disorienting, but it no longer felt menacing. Through it, she could just make out a faint shimmering path, like a trail of stardust. It wasn't a path she could see with her eyes, but one she felt with her heart, a magnetic pull towards the truth. "The true song," she whispered, following the faint shimmer. Lumina, fluttering ahead, let out a joyful chime. "Yes, you feel it. The darkness cannot truly extinguish Ethel's light, only obscure it. Your heart finds the way." They continued like this for what felt like hours, navigating the ever-shifting landscape of the Whispering Woods. Elara learned to trust her instincts, to listen to the subtle cues of the forest, to distinguish the true echoes from the dark imitations. Lumina was an invaluable guide, not just showing her the way, but also teaching her to perceive the magical tapestry of the world around her. They rested by a waterfall whose waters glowed with a soft bioluminescent light, shimmering down into a pool that reflected the faint starlight filtering through the canopy. Elara drank deeply from the glowing water, feeling invigorated, as if the very essence of the forest flowed into her. Lumina sipped around, catching tiny motes of light that danced in the spray. "We are nearing the edge of the Whispering Woods," Lumina chimed, settling on Elara's shoulder. "Beyond here lies the Emerald Mire, a place of ancient growth and deep secrets. The path will become even more challenging. More challenging than shifting forests and sorrowful beasts?" Elara asked, a wry smile touching her lips. She was tired, But the journey had awakened something new within her, a resilience she hadn't known she possessed. "Oh, yes," Lumina replied, its voice twinkling. "The mire is guarded by the oldest of Ethel's children, creatures born when the world was young. They are not easily swayed, and their patience is as vast as the mire itself." As they spoke, the trees began to thin, and the ground underfoot grew softer, damper. The air became thick with the scent of rich, dark earth and blooming water lilies. The luminous trees gave way to colossal, ancient cypress trees draped with shimmering moss, their roots snaking across the ground like sleeping serpents. They had reached the emerald mire. The mire was a vast, sprawling wetland, bathed in a perpetual twilight. The sky above, though unseen through the dense canopy, seemed to cast a greenish glow, reflected in the still, dark waters that stretched as far as the eye could see. Giant water lilies, their petals the size of dinner plates, floated serenely, some glowing with a soft internal light. The air hummed with the buzz of unseen insects and the croaking of enormous ancient frogs. The path here was not a path at all, but a series of moss-covered stepping stones, barely visible above the water, winding precariously between the massive cypress roots. Elara had to pick her way carefully, testing each stone before trusting it with her full weight. Lumina, of course, darted ahead, its light a tiny beacon in the dimness. "These stones are ancient," Lumina chimed, waiting for Elara on a particularly large, flat stone. "They were laid by the first moon-petal weavers to reach the spires, but the mire has grown and the water has risen. Some stones are submerged, and some are gone altogether." Elara looked out at the vast expanse of water, feeling a pang of despair. How could she cross? It was too wide, too deep. She couldn't swim, and the water looked dark and mysterious. Then she noticed something moving in the water near one of the largest cypress roots. A ripple, then a slow, deliberate rise of a vast, flat surface. It was a lily pad, but immense, larger than any she had ever seen, its surface covered in soft, velvety moss. And on it, something was stirring. Slowly, gracefully, the head of an enormous turtle emerged from the water. Its shell was like a mosaic of emeralds and jade, covered in ancient runes that glowed faintly from within. Its eyes were ancient and wise, the color of deep forest pools, and its gaze seemed to pierce right through Elara, seeing not just her, but the light she carried within. "Another seeker of the heart," a voice rumbled, deep and resonant, like stones shifting beneath the earth. It was not a harsh voice, but one of immense age and authority. Few dare to cross the mire, and fewer still carry the true spark. Elara felt a thrill of awe. This must be one of the ancient children of Ethel, the guardian Lumina had spoken of. "Greetings, venerable one," she said, bowing her head respectfully. "I am Elara, and I seek the crystal spires." The giant turtle shifted, its massive head turning slowly towards her. "The spires are not a destination, child. They are a promise of renewal, of balance. But the promise is broken, and the spires weep." A sigh, like the settling of ancient earth, escaped it. "The darkness grows even here, in the heart of Athel's growth. It drains the glow from the lilies, the song from the waters." Its eyes, so ancient and full of sorrow, fixed on Lyra's stone in Elara's hand. "That is a powerful light you carry, little one. A shard of the moon petal's heart, perhaps, or something older still?" Elara looked down at the stone, feeling its familiar warmth. "It was given to me by my friend Lyra. It guided me here." "Indeed, Lyra, a name from a gentler time, and the moon petal, its light is fading, even as the world needs it most." The turtle lowered its head slightly. "I am Old Man Mire, the keeper of these waters. My purpose is to guard the passage to the spires, and to ensure that only those worthy, those who carry the true light, may pass." Elara felt a surge of hope. "Then may I pass, Old Man Mire?" The turtle regarded her for a long moment, its wise eyes searching her soul. "The path across the mire is treacherous, the true stones are hidden, and the waters are deep, but there is a way, a song that calls to the ancient paths. Can you hear it, child?" Elara closed her eyes, listening intently. The mire was filled with sounds, the croaking of frogs, the hum of insects, the gentle lapping of water. But beneath it all, she began to discern a faint, almost imperceptible melody. It was a deep, flowing hum, like the pulse of the earth itself, weaving its way through the very fabric of the mire. It felt ancient, powerful, and profoundly peaceful. It was the same underlying hum she had felt in the whispering woods, but stronger, more resonant. "Yes," she whispered, opening her eyes. "I hear it. It's like a deep, quiet song." Old Man Mire's ancient eyes seemed to twinkle. "Ah, that is the song of the mire. The song of Ethel's deep roots. It speaks to the true paths, the places where the ancient stones still rest, undisturbed by the encroaching shadows. Follow its guidance, little one. Let it be your compass." He then dipped his massive head and slowly, majestically, began to move. He didn't offer to carry her, but rather, he began to nudge the vast mossy lily pads with his nose, guiding them gently into position, forming a temporary floating bridge across a particularly wide stretch of water. "These are the lily barges," Lumina chimed, excited. "They will carry you where the stepping stones cannot." Elara stepped onto the first lily barge, her heart filled with gratitude. The surface was soft and stable, and as she moved, the lily pad began to glide slowly across the water, propelled by the unseen currents of the mire. Lumina darted around her, a tiny flickering beacon. Old Man Mire, meanwhile, continued his slow, deliberate journey through the mire, his presence a comforting, anchoring force. He didn't speak much, but his movements were a silent symphony of wisdom and patience, showing Elara how to navigate the complex, ever-shifting waterways. As they journeyed deeper into the mire, the ancient hum grew stronger. Elara found that by focusing on it, she could almost feel the hidden stepping stones beneath the water, sensing where to place her feet when the lily barges couldn't reach. The light from Lyra's stone pulsed in rhythm with the mire's song, growing brighter with each true step. The darkness, however, made its presence known even here. Patches of the mire would suddenly grow cold, the lily pads wilting and turning black, their internal light fading to a sickly green. The mire's song would waver, replaced by a low, mournful drone. In these moments, Elara would take a deep breath, focusing on the warmth of Lyra's stone, projecting her own steady light, her own unwavering hope, into the gloom. And slowly, gently, the mire would respond, the cold receding, the lily pads regaining their vibrancy. They encountered strange creatures in the mire, luminous fish that swam in swirling patterns, giant dragonflies with wings like stained glass, and even a family of shy, furry beings with webbed feet and long, expressive tails, who watched them with wide, curious eyes from the safety of the reeds. None were hostile. They were simply inhabitants of this ancient magical place, going about their lives. After what felt like an eternity, but was likely only a day or two, the mire began to change again. The water grew shallower, and the giant cypress trees gave way to rolling hills covered in shimmering knee-high grass. In the distance, through a perpetual haze, Elara could finally discern them. The crystal spires. They rose from the landscape like colossal shards of frozen starlight, piercing the heavens. Their surfaces seemed to be made of pure, crystalline light, shimmering with all the colors of the rainbow, yet somehow translucent, as if carved from solidified dreams. They were impossibly tall, reaching far above the highest clouds, and around them, the air itself seemed to hum with a powerful ancient energy. Elara gasped, her breath catching in her throat. They were more magnificent than anything she could have imagined, radiating a silent, majestic power that resonated deep within her soul. This was Ethel's heart, its very essence, made manifest. But as she drew closer, she also saw the truth of Old Man Mire's words. The spires, for all their glory, were not whole. Cracks, like veins of shadow, marred their flawless surfaces. Patches of their vibrant light flickered and died, leaving dull, opaque scars. And around their bases, a swirling dark mist pulsed, like a hungry living thing, trying to devour their light. The spires were weeping. Old Man Mire, who had followed them to the edge of the mire, let out a deep, sorrowful rumble. "The darkness grows bold, child. It seeks to extinguish the heart of Ethel entirely. You are here, but the journey has only just begun. The path to the spires themselves is guarded by the deepest shadows, the greatest despair." Elara looked at the majestic, yet wounded spires, then at the swirling darkness around their base. Her heart ached, but her resolve only strengthened. She had come this far. She had faced the beast of the pass, navigated the shifting woods, and traversed the ancient mire. She carried Lyra's stone, and Ethel's living light pulsed within her. "I won't let it win," she whispered, her voice firm, even as a shiver of apprehension ran down her spine. "I will find a way." Lumina, perched on her shoulder, chimed softly, its tiny light a steadfast companion. "We will, Elara, together." The sun, unseen for days in the deep canopies, now seemed to press against the distant horizon, casting long purple shadows across the glimmering hills. The crystal spires, wounded but still magnificent, beckoned. But between Elara and their base lay the final, most formidable barrier, the swirling darkness, thicker and more menacing than anything she had yet encountered. It was a physical manifestation of the corruption, a wall of pure despair. What lay within it, what horrors it contained, Elara could only guess. But she knew with a certainty that settled deep in her bones, that she had to pass through it. The fate of Ethel, and perhaps her own, depended on it. With a deep, shaky breath, Elara stepped into the swirling darkness. It pressed in, cold and heavy, whispering doubts. "You are too small. Not strong enough." But Elara clutched the memory of Ethel and the unicorn's grace. From her unwavering heart, a faint silver light bloomed, pushing back the shadows, creating a shimmering path. Her hope guided her through. She emerged, gasping, into a moonlit clearing. The magnificent lead unicorn, its horn glowing faintly despite the dark wound, dipped its head. Gently, Elara placed her glowing hands upon the injury. A warmth, pure as starlight, flowed from her, mending the corruption. The unicorn's wise eyes met hers in a silent, "Thank you." Now, as the unicorn healed, the oppressive darkness across Ethel receded like dawn banishing night. Golden light seeped back, the air grew sweet, forests hummed with renewed life. Elara, tired but triumphant, watched as the unicorn's power restored, galloped back into Ethel, carrying peace. She had saved her home. Now Ethel could sleep soundly, its light shining bright. "And so, little one, can you?"